Always a good time talking college football. Get a plethora of information from our pal Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet, Brian Blessing. We're both in Las Vegas, and we're ready to rock and roll for college football this week. But before we look ahead, look behind the injury to Tua, Bruce, and the impact it has on Bama and the kid's future.
Well, you know, the first thing that I thought when I was watching that, at least on the replay, I mean, flashbacks to Bo Jackson came to me, although, you know, as we were talking off air there, Jackson was headed upfield when he got tackled in that game against the Bengals, and Tua was headed to the sideline, but the same sort of, action there that caused the injury. And you see so few hip injuries like that, and I recall right at the outset, they didn't know that Jackson's injury was as serious as it turned out to be. But hips are nothing to mess with here, and you just have to hope that this isn't something that stops this kid's career. But I think Alabama, I hope they don't use this as a reason to keep Alabama. There's other reasons to maybe keep Alabama out of the Final Four. This shouldn't be one. If Alabama beats Auburn with Mac Jones, they won the game with him before. He looked really good. Listen, teams have only backup quarterbacks before. This hardly should disqualify Alabama from when it comes down to it. It looks like it's going to be dicey for them to get in the Final Four. They're going to need some, but right now they are still in that, the top four of the latest bowl poll. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. Mac Jones has played earlier this year. They won with him in there, and he's obviously really good. So I don't think we should write off Alabama just yet.
All right, let's always look ahead. That's what we do. And let's focus on a Thursday night football game, and that's North Carolina State and Georgia Tech. And lo and behold, the Georgia Tech team that we knew would have growing pains is actually favored at home, a 1.5 point favorite over NC State, totals 46. It kind of tells you the state of affairs for NC State. The bottom line is, Bruce, neither one of these teams has much of an offense.
Is it too late for ESPN to pull out of this one? That would be my question here, because this doesn't seem like much of a national TV game for them to have, but it is what it is. If there's a vote here, it's a vote against NC State based upon what's going on there. They have failed to cover 8 of their last 9. I think Dave Doran is in real trouble, their head coach. He was in real trouble a few years ago at the end of the season, pulled out a game against North Carolina and got bowl eligible, then beat Vanderbilt in the bowl. Saved his job, but he's working for a different AD than the one that hired him. When you have this much of a drop-off after being in trouble a few years before, it's a problem. This is a classic case of a program unraveling to me, and I am sure if Doran stays there next year, he's going to have to make changes on staff. And you're seeing no surprise if the assistants are out there networking right now. Players know what's going on. And they might be looking to move out too. It's very disconcerting when, especially in this sort of situation, when it's not completely sure, but you're thinking there's a good chance your coach and much of his staff might get moved out. So I don't want to go with NC State. By the way, they've been on 3 quarterbacks this year. None of them have looked very good. Georgia Tech was showing improvement until the Virginia Tech game, but Virginia Tech's really hot right now. Jumped on Georgia Tech early, and that game just got out of hand. I don't think that's the case tonight. 27-22 Georgia Tech, lesser of 2 evils in Atlanta.
Hey, by the way, just as an aside, and looking ahead to next week, with the exception of Akron, who we know is just god-awful, although they actually played a competitive football game as a 31-point dog. These weeknight MAC games, Bruce, I got to tell you, bud, I've been doing this forever. Since they went to these weeknight MAC games, the odds makers are actually kind of throwing us a bone. And I mean that sincerely. These weeknight games are just a circus act. They are track meets, and I think, they look at the weather, and, it's cold up in Ohio and Michigan or Buffalo. These offenses the defenses are the one that are slipping around. These games are track meets, and they always have been, yet they keep putting relatively low totals up. It's funny. I mean, we always tip our hat to the odds makers. I think they completely missed the boat on the MAC on these weeknight games. I really do. This has gone on for too many years now. I mean, I probably shouldn't say a word,
Well, the secret's out. There you go, Brian. You you told everybody, but no,
Well,
you're right.
I mean, even the game last week, Bruce, I thought, oh, okay, there it is. I'm dead wrong. And it was Eastern Michigan and Northern Illinois, and it's 14-7 at the half. And I'm going, wow, was I wrong? Did I miss the boat on that? Well, second half, they scored 38 points. It went over. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, yeah, we've talked about, you brought this up before, and it's right. It didn't happen with the Miami game last night, but I think that's the only one this week. I mean, Ohio put 66 on Bowling Green the other night, so, and Buffalo and Toledo was a track meet last night. So, it just seems to be, but it's more the MAC. I'm not
just
usually
the MAC.
they've thrown the Sun Belt. They've thrown them in there before. That we haven't seen as much of them midweek. I think we might get one or two of them next week. But it's more the MAC. It seems like it's been the case.
Yeah, that was my caveat before. Except a team like Akron, although when Akron scores, there should be an investigation. And,
yes.
And they actually played a good game last night. So anyway, good for them. All right. I mean, anyway, I just want to pick your brain on that because we always sing the praises of the odds makers, and rightly so. I mean, it's downright remarkable, what they do across the board. It's funny though. I mean, it just seems like I don't know. I honestly don't know what it is, what they're thinking. If it's weather that possibly, makes the totals lower, but in many instances, I think the weather is the thing that helps promote the overs because the defense is slipping around. Anyway.
Yeah, it's true. I agree.
All right, sir. Let's move on to tomorrow night, Mountain West game. Colorado State, Wyoming. Wyoming's laying 6.5. I think we'll see some 7s on game day. Total on this game is 50.5.
This is one hot border war. A lot of people, this flies way under the radar. A lot of people don't realize, one, that these are rivals, and they're the closest schools to one another. And I went to one of these games once many years ago, and there is a lot of hate, believe it or not, between these two. They're the biggest rival for each other. In this case, an extra under the extra factor here, Colorado State's trying to fight to save Mike Bobo's job. They got to win a couple more to get bowl eligible here. That is no guarantee of a bowl in the Mountain West because you can get to 6 like Wyoming did last year and not get invited. In fact, that's where Wyoming is sitting right now. This rugby-like offense Wyoming runs. They've got the backup quarterback Vanderwall in there now. He's serviceable, but he's not quite the playmaker Sean Chambers was, who was the starter, who is now out for the season. The Rams had covered 5 of 6 this year, and they'd won 3 in a row before that late pick 6 against Air Force last week. So they have been playing better. I think they keep this thing close. Wyoming just doesn't have enough offense to extend a margin unless some crazy things happen. But they're functional because their defense is tough. 22-19 Wyoming. I think they win this one. They'll be happy to survive the border war. That gets Wyoming to 7 as well. That's the magic number you want to get to in the Mountain West for bowls. But we'll see about Mike Bobo and his job after a bit here.
All right, let's go to Saturday, and let's dive right in here. Oklahoma State laying 6.5 at West Virginia. Total on the game, let's call the consensus 55.5, Bruce. Now, if weather is a thing, okay, maybe. But at first blush, looking at it, I just don't think West Virginia's offense, and we knew there was going to be a transition there this year, I can't see West Virginia keeping up with Oklahoma State offensively. I mean, it's hard to predict turnovers, but that's their only recipe in this game is to force some turnovers.
Yeah, and there was credit West Virginia coming up the big effort last week. I didn't see that coming at Kansas State, and they won, and they played at Baylor pretty tough a couple of weeks ago. So Neil Brown has got this team competing, but they are on limited rations offensively, and they switched to the Bowling Green transfer Seth Dagey at quarterback. Didn't really ignite the offense last week, but did just enough for them to win. They haven't scored more than that 24 in more than a month. So it's going to be tough to keep pace with Oklahoma State in case there's some weather there. They got the running back to take care of business, and that's Chuba Hubbard right on top of the country, and Sanders has been good enough passing the ball. And interestingly, the Mullet Man has beaten more potent West Virginia teams the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And the surging Cowboys, quietly, they've covered 9 of their last 11. This is a pretty good team. They got Oklahoma coming up to following week in Bedlam, which will be big. 31-19 Cowboys. I suppose they could be looking ahead. I think that's a little bit of an overrated angle. Whatever, I think they'll show up and win at Morgantown.
Let's move on, Bruce, where certain scenarios that have always stood the test of time are in play. and they focus on the Oklahoma and Baylor game last week, which was insane. Oklahoma laying 18 to TCU. Total is 65. An insane second half for Oklahoma to come back, and we'll talk about Baylor in a moment. But roaring back that big win, and we know Gary Patterson. He's one of those coaches can dial stuff up. Is it a letdown spot for Oklahoma? And oh, by the way, not that they look past these guys, but they got big fish to fry. Oklahoma State on the road next week.
Yeah, and by the way, I think they're getting shuffled back a bit too far, and for whatever reason, the bowl committee has decided Oklahoma is not going to be worthy this year, and these Pac-12 teams are a better option for the Final Four. That's what looks like the direction they're heading. I don't know what their rationale is with it. I don't agree with it. You might be right with Oklahoma. They got Oklahoma State on deck off of the Baylor game. That one is the one. I think the letdowns are a bigger deal, and you could certainly have one after that. But they're only, Lincoln Riley, and this is back to Bob Stoops too. I mean, they're just about a 50-50 play against the spread. There's nothing compelling about them with their point spread history to suggest you have to lay a lot of points with them. I mean, TCU's offense is sort of a fire drill. I mean, every play looks like a broken play, which is why I like this quarterback, Duggan. He is really scrappy, the freshman, and I think he'll trade points for a while with Jalen Hurts and company. Eventually, they'll probably lose contact, but they are 8-4 as a road dog versus ranked teams since 2011, and that's Gary Patterson in a good role for him. So I think they stay within this big number. 41-28 Sooners. They'll win, set up a big one in Bedlam, and hope for some love from the bowl committee.
Well, to your point, Bruce, and let's talk about that briefly. I think you're onto something here with Oregon 6, Utah 7. And we know the potential for cannibalization above them. I think Clemson's in the cookie jar. But you got the LSU, Georgia, and Alabamas of the world, button heads. Are they saying after all these years they're trying to get a Pac-12 team in there?
They might. And I think this is non-conference schedules and just schedules overall. Utah's schedule, no, they haven't beaten. Okay, they have played one team now this week because USC moved back into the top 25. They lost to USC. Oklahoma, we can cite, they've beaten the Big 12. I think is a better league top to bottom than the Pac-12, which is not that great. But look at some teams like we might get the Texas A&M and Auburn later, but and A&M will get to, I'm sure. But look at the schedules those teams have played. A&M has played 4 of the top 5 teams in the country. And, then Auburn, which might be a top 10 team. Auburn has played a very similar schedule. Just swap out Oregon for Clemson. And, by the way, Auburn beat Oregon. This is the 5th best team in the SEC that was playing the game. It was close, but they had a quarterback who had never stepped on campus before, and Oregon's got their guy who's supposed to be the first player in the draft, and this is Oregon's team. I know they were ahead most of the game, but they didn't win. Auburn won, and this is supposed to be the best team in the Pac-12, but they're supposedly, better than almost everybody else. I don't buy it. This is why I don't like the 4-team playoff. There's too much politics involved. Rob Mullins, I know he has to step out of the room. He's Oregon's AD. He's the head of the bowl committee, and he has to step out of the room when they talk about it. I don't buy it. I could do a better job with this stuff than a lot of these guys. I'm not just tooting my horn, and you do it too. And I think this in NCAA basketball, I set up a better bracket than a lot of these ADs set up. And I don't trust them, and I don't like what they're doing with this. No.
Well, okay. To your point, though, Oregon and Utah. I mean, a defined collision course, right? Oh
yeah, absolutely. Unless we can get one of these Arizona schools this weekend, or Colorado next week against, and the Beavers next week. Yeah, I think the winner of that game very well could be in the Final Four. Yeah.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today, simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, we soldier on, racing into the weekend. It's out of curiosity, Liberty at Virginia. Let me throw one in here with Virginia, 17-point favorite. But these are the kind of games, right, where a school like Liberty, I mean, they hang their hat on a game like this, right? Recruiting the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and I generally don't like these games for a Power 5 school. A non-conference game in November is usually a very tricky thing. I mean, we saw that with South Carolina a couple of weeks ago. After all those big games, they played one after another, and now you've got a non-conference game, a good team in App State coming in there, but not Florida or Georgia, these teams they've been playing, and App State treating that game like it's a Super Bowl, and App State goes in there and wins. It is very tough. In September, it's one thing because you're getting into the season and you haven't played a lot of games yet. But at this stage, again, the letdown thing is something. And Virginia's played a lot of big games and has a big one against Virginia Tech next week for the Coastal Championship. So you wonder, I could almost see Bronco coaching this game a little bit different. They want to win that game next week. That's the deal in the look-aheads, I think. The coaches certainly know it. And Liberty's got, the quarterback, my favorite nickname, Buckshot Calvert. He's thrown for almost 3,000 yards. The Falwells are coming to a bowl near you somewhere.
Before I hear you say it, I hear your projected score, let me just throw this out there. Bronco Mendenhall's known for defense. But of late, this is a Virginia team that's producing some pretty consistent points, and they are giving up points more than I'm sure he's comfortable with. And again, as you mentioned, with that look-ahead spot, and Liberty with motivation to make some noise in the area, I'm looking at the total, Bruce. It looks really low to me. I mean, the total's 54. I think this is a game that's in the 60s. I'd love to hear the projection from the Gold Sheet.
34-24 Cavaliers.
That's
so
enough.
I think that's enough to get over. Yep.
All right, there you go. Let's go Big Ten City here, and Illinois going to Iowa. Iowa's laying 15.5. Low total, as is usually the case, sitting there in that 46.5 range. Not one for the faint of heart whenever Iowa suits up.
No, and because this offense doesn't score a lot of points. They haven't scored more than 26 since they played Middle Tennessee back in late September. So now you're asking them to lay a lot of points. It seems like a slug. Now, speaking of slug of points, they scored 63 of them against Illinois last year, so maybe the Fighting Illini has a little bone to pick this year. And Lovey, I'll give him credit. I was ready to throw him out, and I still think they would have been justified firing him. This AD is going to fly this into the side of a mountain with Lovey. That was his first hire. Talking about Josh Whitman, gave him an extension last year that infuriated the Illinois fan base. But Lovey is getting the last laugh here. They've won 4 in a row. They've gotten bowl eligible, and the win last week against 2 weeks ago against Michigan State was really uplifting. They were way behind in that game. A lot of big plays in the fourth quarter. You got that revenge from last year. The ex-Michigan quarterback Peters threw for almost 400 yards in that comeback against Michigan State. I don't think Iowa's got enough offense to handle this spread here. 27-24 Hawkeyes. That's a pretty good vote for Illinois, which is also a Gold Sheet key release.
All right, pal, I'm going to throw this one out there, and analytics and algorithms and power rankings and blah, 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 blah. This is one where I've seen it before. And if that means anything to anybody, I don't know, but sometimes it means something to me. And it's Iowa State's laying 24.5 to Kansas. The total's 58. This just reeks of one of those games where, Iowa State, you're like, are you kidding me? I mean, they used to be, the big upset, and then they throw clunker after clunker out there. But even when they're a good team, out of nowhere, they just throw the ridiculous clunker. They're, letdown spot. They beat Texas 23-21. We know Kansas on occasion shows up, had that wild shootout with Texas. I think this game's a track meet, and I'm telling you, I no way do I trust Iowa State laying that kind of. I just had this weird feeling. This is like that Iowa State game where you're going, well, the Cyclones did it again, spit the bit.
Well, it could be. I mean, every game they've had has been pretty close since the West Virginia game, and TCU. Now they got both of them, but that was well over a month ago with those two. So you might be right here. I mean, Kansas, it's been tough going the last couple of weeks, and they did score a couple times late. They still didn't quite get inside that number against Oak State. When Les Miles changed offensive coordinators midstream, and that was right before the Texas game, The offense, they started playing hyper speed, turbo speed. And for a couple weeks, they were up and down the field. They beat Texas Tech. They almost beat Texas. And then it slowed down the last couple of weeks. The problem is the defense is really poor. And K-State was able to play ball control, and so was Oak State last week. If Iowa State can do that, they'll probably do the same thing. But you may have a point here, because you're right. Iowa State, off of a major win for them, and they had lost a lot of close games. And they had lost 4 games this year by 11 points total, and they finally won one of those against Texas last week. So that's a lot of points. We had a 42-13 Iowa State, but I'm not going to make that a feature pick. You might be right on this one. Not maybe the spot to lay a huge price with the Cyclones, though they are capable if they hit on all cylinders.
All right. No, good. Interesting. Let's go to Minnesota and Northwestern. Minnesota, no disgrace. We know deep in the season you lose that first game and the banana peel's out there the next week, but there's no disgrace in going to Iowa and losing. But I would say this, and talk about the total. Minnesota's laying 13.5. The total's 39.5. From a motivation perspective, though, after this incredible season that Minnesota's had, here turning for home against the meat of their schedule, the quality of their bowl game is dropping like a rock.
Yeah, well, it is, and they've still got
Wisconsin.
Next week's game. Wisconsin will be for the Big Ten West title. Wisconsin was cheering really big for Iowa last week, by the way. So they'll set up the game for Paul Bunyan's axe next week for the Big Ten West.
I lose track, Bruce. Can you keep it? The milk carton,
I know.
The cookie jar. I don't know what they're playing for.
Floyd of Rosedale last week, the pig trophy against Iowa. Well, here's the deal in this game. You got to proceed very carefully. Tanner Morgan, Minnesota's quarterback, been in concussion protocol this week, and we're not going to know until Saturday if he's going to play. If he doesn't, you have to exercise some caution here, because both of his backups are true freshmen. So in that case, now Northwestern ain't much, and they don't score much. But they did have their freshman running back Hull ran for 220 last week and 4 TDs. Yeah, it was against UMass, but I would have thought this year that Northwestern couldn't have had a running back go for 220 against no defense. Now, that might have been no defense last week. That might have been effectively the case, but whatever. I think this is a tricky spot, especially if Morgan doesn't play. So you've got to check that out if he's available. If he's not, I'd be really reluctant to lay it with Minnesota. With Morgan, we had a 30-14 Gophers. Without him, it's a no play for us. And just to make sure you check that one out if you want to get interested in this game.
All right. Oregon is at Arizona State, laying 14. What I'm shaking my head at here a little bit is the total of 52.5. I know Oregon's defense is really good, but this is one of those games, in Tempe, where the weather's going to be great. And, I just looked this in Arizona State circles the game. I think there's points galore in this game. That total looks low to me. But the one thing I would say, and this is why I'm a little leery of the side. I think the number's kind of where it should be. But we're at that time of the year, Bruce, and we just had the discussion 10 minutes ago where Oregon and Utah, they may have to be thinking about style points, because at the end of the day, it could be a deciding factor.
Oh, they've been thinking about it all year. And I really, I'm not keen on these teams that are such bullies like Oregon. I mean, and Oregon was early in the year, the Nevada game, they were standing up on the accelerator to get to 77 points. And they've done that other times this year. And they're bloodthirsty when they have a chance. I don't think they're going to have a chance this week. I think Arizona State plays them very, very tough. And Herm's defense can rush the passer. Now they have dropped 4 straight as well. And that once great looking season at Arizona State is kind of fallen apart, but most of their games are close. I think they'll get Daniels back. They have not been bad against the rush. They're allowing just 109 yards per game. They have played Oregon off their feet the last couple of years, beat them down here a couple of years ago, and also beat Washington when Washington was highly ranked 2 years ago here at home. And last year they could have won that game up in Eugene as well. They covered it. So I think you got a chance to give ASU a look here. And I am really secretly hoping ASU wins this game. I don't like this idea of these Pac-12 teams, beating up on a weak schedule and getting into the Final Four. So go Sun Devils for me. We had a 31-24 Oregon, so I'm not laying the points, and I think this could actually be a very sneaky good game this week.
All right, let's get to it's that time of year. The big rivalry games. Obviously, next week is insane, but there are some now. And we start with UCLA, USC. Trojans laying 14-65.5. Is the luster off the plant here?
Well, for me, I'm writing that book about SC and UCLA, and back in the 65 through 70 McCabe Pro Throw. It hasn't helped my book prospects that these programs, especially UCLA, have gone in the dumpster the last couple of years, but whatever. Win or lose, Clay Helton is likely facing the firing squad soon after this one, because the last stage of that SC house cleaning is right around the corner. It might also claim the Tommy Trojan statue on campus and Traveler 9, the White Horse, but it's coming, and they have done everything, and the last phase is going to be what they're going to do with the football coach. Clay is going to be on his way out. 99.9% sure of that. They've got their AD in place now, and he's doing everything by the book here, and he's going to wait till the season is done. The only question is if he does it before the bowl game or after. I think he'll do it before, but whatever. And SC is playing pretty hard for Helton. That was a good effort last week against Cal, but I don't expect UCLA to be a no-show. UCLA was hanging right there with Utah until late in the first half in what was maybe the most disastrous play of the season. And upon inspection, Dorian Thompson-Robinson might have actually been passing that ball, but instead it got knocked out of his hands backwards and turned into an 80-yard fumble return touchdown for Utah. Instead of 14-6 or 14-10, it probably would have been 14-6. It's 21-3, and UCLA wilted after that. They had been moving the ball pretty effectively prior to that, and the last few weeks they had been picking up the pace as well. They keep this thing close. Remember, Joshua Kelly ran for almost 300 against SC last year. This is a major rivalry, as we all know. And the Bruins, they need 2 wins to get bowl eligible, so they will fight like the Dickens here. And Helton is only 5-10. His last 15 is chalk at the Coliseum. 33-28 SC. I think they avenged that loss last year at the Rose Bowl, but not by much. And the Bruins will come out swinging on a Saturday.
The Pac-12, Bruce, and I know you focus on it so much. It's funny. I mean, there are dead offensive teams and dead defensive teams. And Cal Stanford, the big game, 2.5, and the total tells you something here, 40. These are teams that offensively struggle against, higher caliber opponents. There's intensity in this game. I guess, I think points are at a premium. I think I run away from it, that the total is, it's insanely low, but it makes sense that the field goal kickers be busy in this game.
Yeah, the last 2 years in the big game, Brian, 2 years ago, they had this total up at 54, and it was 17-14 Stanford.
Yeah.
Last year, up 46.5, and that was a game that was postponed 2 weeks because of the fires up there, and they played that on the same day as the conference championship games. And this is the big game. It wasn't a conference championship game, but it only went 23-13 at 46.5. So I could see the same sort of thing. Quarterback issues. Mills was in there last week for Stanford because Costello's been in and out. It's been a disastrous year for David Shaw. They may, the winner here has to stay bowl eligible. They've got to get a win here. And for Cal, which has UCLA next week, and Stanford, which has Notre Dame, Stanford's got to win its last 2 to get bowl eligible. So it's been a bad year. Stanford is 2-7 against the spread this year. No matter who's in there, I think I only saw Stanford's one good game this year against Washington up there, and it's been like a 1-game season for them. The secondary is depleted. They rank 119th in passing yards allowed, even though Modster isn't much of a passer, and it looks like Garbers is out again after he hurt his shoulder. I think Cal can win this game. 21-17 Golden Bears updated score forecast, another low-scoring big game up there, but it is still the big game, and there have been some strange things happen, as we know, in the past when Cal plays Stanford.
Hey, Bruce, one for the little guy last week had Navy Notre Dame over. Notre Dame got into the 50s, and this Navy offense is starting to go pretty good. And clearly, taking on SMU, that defense, they can't stop anybody, but Navy is not going to stop SMU. Navy's 3.5. The total on the game is 66.5. They've actually bet it down a little bit total wise, but I just can't. I'd make the number over under 2.5 punts in this game, maybe 1.5. I don't know. I like the over.
2 years ago, they played here 43-40. in Annapolis. Navy's defense has been better this year. I mean, they've cut about from 34 per game. It was 18 per game into Notre Dame, and then it fell apart for Navy last week. And so fell apart their chances to get into the New Year's Six, I believe. SMU still has hopes for that, and those are not empty hopes for SMU, because the Ponies come in here with just one loss. Memphis has got to play Cincinnati next week. They need somebody to beat Memphis to leapfrog over them in the West, as long as SMU keeps winning, and it's not going to be easy. Navy this week and Tulane next week. But and then Cincinnati's going to wait. Cincinnati could beat Memphis, and that could be the key for SMU to get into the American Championship game if they can keep winning. But I don't think they will here. Navy bouncing up off the loss. They are, leading rushing team in the country. We've heard that before, almost 350 per game. And let's see if Shane Buechele can be on the field enough against this Midi defense off of its worst game of the year that had been playing much better. It's a curious stat. SMU scored some points this year, but they're 98th in red zone offense, so it's usually longer range they're doing their scoring. I don't know if that's going to work. And Navy had been pretty good value this year in Annapolis. A great place to watch a game, by the way. 5-0 against the spread at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. We had a 34-26 midshipman. We'll see about your total. You could be right. But I think Navy side is the way to look on this one.
All right, Bruce, we got to get to it here. Texas and Baylor. Baylor laying 5.5. The total is 59. My goodness. I mean, the old bubble burst theory, if it don't apply here, I don't know where it does. Baylor with the second half to I can't imagine these kids have slept all week. 3 first downs in the second half, probably won that game against Oklahoma, and they could not get out of their own way. That's a tough one to recover from.
Yeah, it's like somebody pulled the power plug on Baylor right at the worst time after the power surge all season. So that hissing sound you hear from Waco is the sound of air coming out of the Baylor balloon after they blew that 25-point lead, and a chance for the Bears to make some real noise. But I'm still curious why this number is so high, because Baylor had played so many close games all season before that. The Iowa State game and the Texas Tech game and the West Virginia game and the TCU game. And 2 of those games went into multiple overtimes. The other 2 were decided in the last minute. And now here we go. Tom Herman is a dog. Once again, 15-4 now as a dog since 2015 at Houston and UT. That includes getting +1 a few weeks ago in a loss to TCU. But they're a little healthier defensively now. And now they were off a gut-wrenching loss themselves last week to Iowa State. They thought they had that thing won in a nice comeback. They didn't. But Herman is a dog. And by the way, Matt Rule's got the same sort of pattern over at Baylor. He's been a very good dog, not as good as a favorite in these spots, which is kind of like Tom Herman. But the technicals suggest Texas here. 33-27 Longhorns. Tom Herman is a dog again. We usually use that one. We'll use it again. Gold sheet key release on the Horns.
All right, Bruce, talk to me, please. Sir, if you would. Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech. Hokies are laying 4. The total on the game is 45.5. And, current form, Virginia Tech is on a heater. And you can make the case they should have beat Notre Dame. They are playing their best football at the right time of year.
Yeah, they are. And this is an interesting matchup. Sneaky good this week. Although it turns out, Pitt is in some trouble to get to win it's half of the ACC like last year. That opening loss to Virginia has really curtailed Pitt. Virginia's going to have a chance to win the Coastal next week against Virginia Tech, who they haven't beaten in 15 years. So we'll see. But Tech is 5-0 this year with Hendon Hooker in there at quarterback. He's been really good, and they looked great last week in that big romp against Georgia Tech. And they've played great, and Wake Forest a great win, and so is Notre Dame. Great effort at Notre Dame. But Pitt is pretty tough. Pat Narduzzi, quietly good. They've covered the last 5 in this series. They're 4-0 versus the line away this year. Pickett, the quarterback, has been not too bad. He's got a tendency for big plays, 22 TD passes the last 1+ years, so he can make plays. And Pitt does lead the nation in sacking the quarterback, 42. This is Narduzzi's stuff. And by the way, I've mentioned this to you on other shows this week. Just keep an eye on Narduzzi here, because in case something opens up in the Big Ten. I don't think Mark D'Antonio is in immediate trouble at Michigan State, but I don't know for sure. Narduzzi might not be a bad guy to slide in there. He had worked for D'Antonio before. But anyway, just keep an eye on Narduzzi. He's on his way up, unless Pitt's a destination job, which some people think it is. 24-23 Pitt. We're going to call the slight upset here for the Panthers, and there you go.
Well, would either one of these teams, I would say, just from the current form perspective, although Pitt's defense can certainly bog teams down, does either one of these teams, if they run the table here, do they have something for Clemson in the ACC title game? Can they give them a run?
No, I don't think so. Clemson's in a different stratosphere than these. We saw it last year. Pitt, last year was playing pretty well at the end of the year and got routed. So I just think, Clemson in that league is in a different category.
All right, this is the elephant in the room. I got to talk to my friend Bruce Marshall. Penn State at Ohio State. We're seeing a number here that is eye-popping. 18.5. Ohio State is favored. The total is 57.5. And you're talking number 2 is playing number 8 in the college football playoff rankings, laying 18.5 points. I know Ohio State has just been a monster. Is that just massive love for Ohio State, or are they dissing Penn State with this number?
Well, I think they're dissing Penn State, both, and massive love for Ohio State. And I'll be careful how I say this, because Ohio State was sort of challenged by Wisconsin earlier in the year, and then they just took control of that game, and they won it going away. But I want to see how they react if a game – but that by the time the third quarter came around, Ohio State was well in control. I want to see how this team reacts when it's the Noose Titans in the second half, and they're in a game that's kind of close. I haven't really seen that this year. They have now because they've been beating everybody so bad. They haven't been in that situation yet. But let's see how they react when it gets really tough and when things aren't everything you want to do doesn't work.
Bruce, look at their schedule, though. I mean, yeah. I guess that's my point. We saw this in the NFL, the first 3 weeks of the season. The Cowboys, they're throw a parade. They're talking about it like they're the 85 Bears. They played the Dolphins, the Redskins, and the Giants, and then all of a sudden you come back to earth. Is this a gauntlet? Florida, Atlantic, Cincinnati, Indiana, Miami of Ohio, Nebraska, Michigan State's down, Northwestern. Okay, they thumped Wisconsin. Then Maryland and Rutgers? I mean, my goodness, who have they played? Seriously.
Yeah. Well, Cincinnati and Wisconsin will argue with that a little bit, but that's the only game Cincinnati lost. But you're right. I mean, they've had it. I mean, the bottom line is they're going to have it a lot tougher here. The last 3 years, these games have been decided by 5 points total. Penn State has been able to play with these guys. James Franklin's covered 6 of his last 7 as a dog. Clifford has a full season under his belt now. 22 TD passes, 6 picks. 3 of those came at Minnesota. Except for that game, he's been pretty flawless. And he'll be under some pressure. And Chase Young, I believe, does return from suspension here.
Yes.
But Penn State has played these guys off their feet. And is it really 3 touchdowns different than last year? I know Ryan Day's got Ohio State playing at a really high level. This guy hasn't won anything
How
yet.
about him? Thank you. I was just going to say, all of a sudden, hats off. I mean, he's, following the guy. But, I mean, you look what was left in the cupboard. I mean, now it's the big stage for the coach.
It is, and here we go, another team that's just running up these scores whenever it has a chance. And it's the bullies always meet their match. And I was doing some other shows this week and people talking about Ohio State now great. And I said, I don't want to hear that. I'm old enough to remember Ohio State 1969, which was the best college team I thought I ever saw until the last game at Michigan in Bo's first year there, and Bo beat them. These teams are nobody's unbeatable in this thing, and Ohio State certainly isn't. I think they'll win this game. I don't think they'll cover it, though. 35-26, Ohio State. I cannot wait for them to get in the Final Four and run into one of these big boys like Clemson or Alabama and get exposed. That's my early projection, but for Saturday, too many points to give a very quality underdog.
All right, we'll give the Mountain West some love here. Wrap it up with 3 games in the Mountain West. Not that anybody other than around here would know or care, because it hasn't been, it ain't the house that Ruth built, that's for sure. But San Jose State at UNLV laying 7, total of 65. Last game ever at Sam Boyd Stadium, as they'll be moving to the Raiders Stadium next year. But San Jose State laying a touchdown on the road. Yikes.
Well, yeah, San Jose still thinks it can get bowl eligible. Again, 6 in the Mountain West doesn't get you a guarantee anywhere, but they've been playing better this year than UNLV. You're right. Will the Rebels dig deep? Their last game at this windswept, unloved Sam Boyd Stadium. They move to the Raiders Allegiant Stadium next year, or win one for their likely lame duck coach, Tony Sanchez. But as neither Sam Boyd nor Sanchez has prevented this tumble to 2-8 straight up this year, I would just prefer the more consistent look of rested San Jose, legitimate quarterback in Josh Love. He's thrown for almost 3,200 yards. It's a better team than UNLV, and they're hungry. And listen, a team like this, any chance it gets to win a game, it's like throwing meat in front of a hungry tiger here. They're going to come out and they're going to play. And UNLV just hasn't been that good this year, and I don't think they're going to turn it around even in their last game at home. Maybe I'll go out and watch just for old time's sake. I don't know. 31-22, San Jose State. I like this team a lot, and they've been very good against the spread too. So I'll take them. It's not going to be a capacity crowd there. I'll guarantee you that.
Oh boy, yeah. Boise State's at Utah State. Boise State laying 8.5. Total of 53. Could they be walking into a banana peel here?
Well, they might. I mean, Boise is in position if something happens in the American, one of those top teams where they could slip into the New Year's Six. They're hurt now because their loss this year against BYU came after Memphis and Cincinnati lost. So that's kind of hurting Boise right now. Utah State's been sort of a disappointment to me this year. Their defensive numbers are way down, and this is Gary Anderson back there after several years elsewhere, Wisconsin, Oregon State, and a year off. But their defense last year was number 51 nationally, and they were sitting at 102 into the Wyoming game last week, so they're up a bit from that. But they're well down this year. Boise found another quarterback last year. That third stringer Henderson looked really good against New Mexico. So in case Bachmeier is still hurting, they got another guy they can go to besides Cord. And I think they go in there and win at Logan because Utah State's been kind of a disappointment this year. 41-26, Broncos in this one.
All right, and then the other one, which is intriguing, and this will be San Diego State and Hawaii. Hawaii is laying 2.5. There's some threes out there. The total on the game is 48. Now, the one thing we should throw out, these games are being played around those two, the game we just mentioned. They're being played within a half an hour of one another. When you look at the standings, a Hawaii win, would basically give them the nod in the West. And, the Boise State Air Force deal, Air Force, they're sitting there a game back, and if they were to pull off the ups, or if they're, Air Force is a big fan of Utah State in that game because then they'd be breathing.
Yes, and as far as and Air Force will beat New Mexico, and that's the game postponed for the unfortunate death of the New Mexico player from a couple weeks ago. So they'll beat New Mexico, which is really having a rough year. San Diego State, Hawaii, though, this is the interesting one. Yeah, the winner of this wins the West. Watching Rocky Long's version of the San Diego State spread this year has been as aggravating as sitting in Honolulu traffic, which it might swell more than usual around Aloha Stadium with all that's at stake here. But Rocky's D is still as functional as ever. And with Nick Rolovich pulling his quarterbacks in and out the way Sparky Anderson used to swap his relievers, I think you got a case here for San Diego State, which has won all 3 times here in Honolulu since the Rainbow Warriors joined up in the Mountain West. So Rocky's won there. Rocky's 5-0 straight up away this year. Hawaii has got an extended poor mark as home chalk. It's not a big number here, but they have not been offering much value at Aloha Stadium. 8-18-1 versus the spread as host under Nick Rolovich. I think San Diego State goes and gets them there. 24-17 Aztecs. And this would give them the West. Hawaii, if it wins the West, will be on the road at either Boise or Air Force for the conference title game. So will San Diego State be on the road. I would rather, San Diego State's been kind of interesting as a dog. I hate to lay points with them, but I will take them on the road, and this is the case this week.
Another week, we're heading towards rivalry week, the playoffs, the bowls. It's going by fast, my friend.
Yeah, it seems like it was just September, and here we are. Basketball season started, and we're getting near the end, but a lot more to go. We still got lots to be decided these last couple of weeks.
Hey, when I get done here, I'll make some calls around to Pac-12 athletic directors and tell them, hey, listen, there's a book that's coming out that you got to help this author out.
Tell UCLA to start winning. That would be that would get their fans a little interested again.
There you go. He's Bruce Marshall. I'm Brian Blessing. There's your look at this week in college football.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling, an approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.